have your phone on Do Not Disturb?
I do now.
And watch the table, because it's not connected.
You know, a lot of the times, and I would say, like, the me before would fucking hate these little reminders that you give here and there.
Why?
Well, my reason for that, I would hope I'm a little bit better about it now, but the reason for the hating the reminders, we got cut off because my computer is old as fuck. But I was gonna get into the reason why I would have taken that offense to that is because, yeah, people critiquing. Wait, no, let's slow this down so that I can really get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
Sure, critiquing, but what about critiquing would make anybody take offense to anything? Oh, it's kind of like an attack on my intelligence. Like,
right.
Hey, don't forget this. What the fuck? You don't think I would have thought to...
Right.
Now I'm pissed off because you think I'm an idiot or enough of an idiot to not, like, realize that, yeah, I'm not going to fucking do that next time. And that's where my train of thought goes. But I hope I've been a little bit better with...
A lot of people are like that, though.
Yeah.
I'm definitely like that. I like to think that I'm not, but I am. Like, I'm not good at taking criticism. I need to become better at it, really.
Yeah, well, is that the main reason for why anybody would feel a certain way about taking criticism? It's just, is it only ever an attack on intelligence?
Or just on, maybe not always intelligence, but just their skill level, their competence, really.
Yeah.
But
Like,
people take it personally.
yeah, like, do you comprehend what you're doing? Do you know that you can't be fucking up again?
But there's, like, I'd like to get to a point where I can take criticism even when it's not an attack. Like, even when somebody is critiquing me viciously, like,
Yeah.
because they want to hurt me, I'd like to get to a point where I really can be like, okay, like, I know that person's just being an asshole, but is there any truth to what they said?
Yeah.
You know? Instead of just being like, nah, fuck them. Like, I'm right. There's times where I'll push back against, and these are people that are honestly, or that are giving me constructive criticism, like, not in a vicious way, like, really trying to help me.
Yeah.
And I know they're right, and I still push back against it.
Yeah, no,
just
you do.
Instinctually.
You do, yes, dude, exactly. Dude, perfect. We're going down the exact track I wanted to go down. Because you have this, like, automaticness to your replies. I think it's when it starts going against... I should probably talk more directly into this part. It's like... when I'm not I can't really pinpoint at what part of the conversation it is, but when I do look back on our conversations, if there's any time that it seems like you're kind of like being more belligerent about, I don't know if that's the right word, but belligerent about your responses, it becomes more autonomous than the you that I was talking to a few minutes ago during the same conversation, because I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Because the one that was playing back a whole lot was our last conversation. We were just having this. It was a reason why we didn't make an episode last week, but we were talking about intelligence. And when we do talk about intelligence, this is the one that, along with a few others, I think religion and people's beliefs in that, like, your responses start to become like a little bit more like
aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, either it's because I'm absolutely sure about what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or with other people, it's I tend to make the assumption with people that I don't know as well that they don't know what they're talking about right off the bat. Like, I just start from they probably don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Which isn't a good place to start, but honestly, it's most often accurate. And so I think that I've just conditioned myself into that, which isn't good, but in that particular conversation, and usually when we're talking together, it's because I'm that confident in what I'm saying.
Yeah. I also want to say too that it might be it might also have a bit of emotional value in it, where maybe it's not so obvious, but I do want to say that if there is any emotion from your point of view when you are arguing your case, that there's also like a bit of emotion that's also keeping you to be as aggressive as you are.
That's pushing me that way?
Yeah. Instead of
staying objective?
Yeah, objective. Yeah, I guess so. Like, in a conversation with me, I don't feel like you need to be as aggressive as you usually come across.
Right. No, you're right.
but you do tend to be aggressive. And so when this past week, when I was just pondering over our conversation, I was like, why the fuck does our conversation like get to that point? And thinking about it, I've also been coming across like a few texts. Like, in my English class, we have this whole book of habits. I've brought it up a few times now. I think you've seen the book on my desk at my house. And like, I don't know how much you know about like habits and just how much that's like ingrained in our lives, or if you even believe that.
No, I do, for sure.
And with that, if we're to like give that any like, if that does hold any truth, like, I can definitely see how if you've conditioned yourself into arguing that way about that certain topic, then that would be consistent with how you would always talk about it, regardless of who you're talking with about that subject.
Absolutely. I think that your mind takes the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And if you've grooved in this well-worn path, it's like a river. Like, it's gonna flow. Like, the river is not all of a sudden gonna break through the sides of its bank and carve a new pathway unless some type of blockade is put in the way. Your mind is just gonna follow its course that has been ingrained.
Yeah.
And I think that's the course that I've ingrained in my mind.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, 'cause even during the event, like, I'm not able to like really say what's happening until like days after, when I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, that was weird. And then I start actually giving that like thought, like, why was it weird? Oh, because this kind of happened.
On the same token, I do think that all is fair in intellectual discussion. It's kind of like when two MMA fighters step into the ring.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know if this is true, but I assume that some of them are friends, but like when they're in the ring, they're mortal enemies.
Yeah.
So like in an intellectual debate, like it's kind of like that for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For me, I would say, and I guess this would be a fault on my part where maybe I haven't clarified what I'm trying to get out of a conversation most of the time, but because when we do get into those conversations, because I feel like I am objective in the way that I think and believe and take in information. So when I do come up against something that's like a little aggressive or maybe kind of blockades me from getting past or getting to know more information about something. Like we brought up the topic of like why like somebody with mental handicap wouldn't be able to get beyond the area that they can learn.
Their intellectual cap.
Yeah, and one of the or the main thing that you brought up was just because of what is physically there, which is their frontal lobes, I guess, or like lack of it, right? Am I?
Yeah, no, you're right. That no one is missing their entire frontal lobe, but you know, there's some deficiency. Yeah. There's some defect in the brain.
And with that, here's also, so as I'm going through this, I'm also like recalling what went wrong, and here's where maybe another part of it I went wrong with is that I also was fighting from a stance where like I was a little aggressive on my part too, in that I did have a position and I was fighting towards that position, and perceptually, I guess, it would seem like you were on the opposite side of that position. And so you had to, it was kind of like we had to fight our own positions.
Yeah, and to give those listening context, the fundamentals of the disagreement was intelligence and whether you have an intellectual cap, or whether we were specifically talking about genius level intellect, and whether you can essentially learn yourself to a genius level intellect, educate yourself to a genius level intellect, or whether it is something that you're born with, or at least something that you're born with the potential of, and if you're not born with it, then you can never reach that intellectual height. And that was my position.
Yeah, and mine was that you can grow your intellect, and there is no potential or whatever. Whatever position I'm taking is like very on the opposite end of the position that he's on. And so with our conversation, as I'm going back to me reminiscing about it, there's a point in it where I am also like trying to learn in it. So when there are questions of like where's the proof, or when we do take into account like somebody who is like lacking in or who's mentally handicapped, like I think I asked the question of what goes into teaching them, or what goes into teaching a monkey anything, and what specifically is happening. And in that part of the conversation, that starts to become like I feel like the make it or break it for me, because if the specifics of those situations prove or disprove like a point, or they show something happening that would help either of our cases, that would be the make it or break it for me. Because if it does help your point, then I'd be like, oh shit, okay, I get it now.
You'd concede.
Yeah.
And the reason that we were bringing up people with mental handicaps or lower primates was I was using the analogy between them to extrapolate to what a genius level mind would be like. And so a mentally handicapped person, depending on who it is, of course, but there are many mentally handicapped people that will never understand string theory and could never understand string theory, and it's just not within their intellectual grasp. And my argument was that you need to think of someone with a genius level brain the same way, because to them, we are the lower primates, the mentally handicapped people. And the reason is physiological, just like it is for the mentally handicapped or the lower primate. It's just the opposite. They have more brain power. And so that's why we were bringing up the mentally handicapped and the lower primates.
Yeah, and with that, my thing now is because with the physiological support or the argument, like that in itself is a pretty strong case to make, because who can really argue against like what's physically possible? And with that, the only case I could possibly make, which would either make or break my argument, is to get down to the specifics of like what is going into the learning of anybody, of a regular person, of a monkey, of a mentally handicapped person, of a genius, like what is happening at a more specific level. And
the reason was because you were arguing that if we knew perfectly how to teach those types of people, that we could teach them to a higher level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that was just like an interesting argument, and the arguments we do have tend to be as interesting as that during other times. And thinking back on them, I feel like it's like a bit of a shame when we do get into these arguments that are really good, but then like at some point I have this kind of feeling like we didn't get anywhere, or to some point like neither of us won it. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is that at least in my mind, I didn't feel like anybody won. Maybe you felt like you won your case, but I didn't. If you did win, I didn't feel like you won your case, because like I wasn't convinced yet. I was like, wait, there's still like more questions, and that too was probably like my fault too, because I didn't push the issue. I was like, but the reason I didn't push the issue was just because I was like, okay, we're kind of hitting a block here. I want to like sit and like simmer on this later on.
Well, I'm pretty solid in my position. It would be hard to move me, but I always leave an opening, because one of the worst things, and like you said, like when you brought up religion and my views towards it, one of the worst things about some religious people is if you ask them, is there anything that if I could prove to you that would change your mind? And the answer is no. And that can never be the answer to that question. Like, there can never be a stance you hold where nothing would change your mind. Because even as strong as I am in the stance with that intelligence argument, if you brought me evidence, I would change my mind.
Yeah.
Like, there is evidence that you could bring that would change my mind. Now, whether that evidence exists in this reality, I don't know. But if there was, it would change my mind. Like, any determinative evidence, I'm open to always, you know?
And this is kind of like going back to just me re-observing our conversations, because in the moment, and maybe even now, I would question how the receiving of that evidence would go about. Imagine if there was, and I would even go as far as saying that there is no evidence that would completely support one side. Like, there could always be.
Well, I think there will be eventually.
That just completely smashes one side.
Well, because honestly,
a lot of evidence needs the support of some other structures to help fight its battle. Because then people have to get caught up on certain parts, and then there's also other logical paths taken towards this end of the argument that haven't been explored yet, or that have been explored and still need to have been discussed in that same conversation.
Well, where the debate stands now, you'd essentially have to prove that learning can physically change the brain in dramatic ways. And because it does change the brain, of course. Yeah. That's been shown. Taxi drivers, before GPS and Google Maps came out, they did a study where they looked at their brains, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I know it was some part of the brain. I believe it was the spatial reasoning part of the brain was bigger. And and when they quit their jobs, it shrunk back down to average size not long after. But because they had to memorize the entire map. This was in New York City. Because they had to memorize the entire map of New York City, they that part of their brain actually had more matter.
Yeah.
And more gray matter, I believe, is the one that allows for neuroplasticity. But the difference between before and after was minuscule compared to the difference between a regular average person and a genius. Einstein's, the part of Einstein's brain was 30% bigger. I think 15 or 30. I want to say 30 though, but it was much. I mean, that's a big difference. And
huge frontal lobe.
Yeah, man, there's a big difference. So they'd have to show that to change my mind, you'd either have to show that you can that education can somehow increase your brain power by at least that much, or you
show that your physical brain is growing that much, right? That's what
right.
Okay.
Or show that, or not just growing, but somehow putting in more neurons, something like that, a more concentrated, something like that. some physical representation of brain power would have to increase, or you'd have to somehow disprove disprove the concept that all of cognition comes from the physical brain.
Yeah. Which
that one you're not going to disprove.
Because
I don't want to say that because of course you never know, but like I think we're both in agreement when I say that whatever cognition occurs, that's coming from the brain. That's the brain. There's a neural correlate to that, to any form of cognition. Like
yeah, I guess so.
I mean, that's where all signs point to that so far. Like we've not once found something yet that comes somewhere else. That comes from the outside or from wherever, you know what I mean? The only thing that is even remotely on the fence would be sentience itself, like consciousness, qualia, like subjective experience itself. That, since we don't really know where or when that arises, that is kind of on the fence of where that comes from.
Yeah.
But everything mechanical, your thoughts, your everything like that, the mechanical aspect is physical, has physical correlates.
In only the mind?
No, in everything.
Oh.
Like the mechanical aspect of anything, it has to come from. I mean, that's all there is, you know, like that we know of. I suppose I should say, but I always imply as far as we know.
Yeah.
But some things we just know. Like it would be crazy if we found out it was something different.
Well, even during this conversation right now, because there's an observation I'm having too. Because as you're speaking, there's a fixedness. You're fixation on like one position, and I mean, I don't know if...
Well, it's not one position. It's the most probable position.
Yeah.
By far. Like, disproving that all mechanical aspects of cognition come from physical correlates would be as massive as disproving gravity now. Like, we know it's there. And so... like, to disprove it would be insane. Like, it wouldn't make sense with everything that we already know. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how deep the physical correlate of cognition goes.
Well, here's the thing. I'm trying to get to, like, just what I'm observing right now. And I don't know now if I should just, like, get to the message of what I'm trying to get at, or if I should continue down this path as an example of what I'm trying to get at.
No, go ahead. Go.
So, with it, there is with this position of, like, gravity or what we know about shit, from what I'm observing, there's your position that you're taking a position. The fact that you're taking a position at all, this is what I'm observing right here. And then I don't know if you see it in my face. I definitely feel it in my face when you do bring up your position and whatever else we should, like, assume off of that position. Like, now my mind is working, like, against that position, and that may be going back to habitual nature. Like,
that's totally counterproductive, because like, that's how you can't have intellectual discussion without that.
Wait, let me let me finish. But you see it in my face, right, when you do bring up your position, and then, like,
yeah, of course,
because, like, I already, like, I'm kind of like, no, that you're not gonna bring up a position and act like this is the only way, because you know where I'm coming from. Like I've, at least in my mind, I've seen things counter, or like in my experience of life so far, there's always been two ways to something. There's always been something counter to the original position.
Right.
If not, like, three different ways, which is where I'm trying to get into now. But, like, there's always been like another side to things.
Right.
And so with our conversations, that's where I'm getting at, is like where we habitually go to.
But certain concepts that you can take that route with everything. But if you want to have an intellectual discussion, certain things you ride off of the assumption of all those things. And if you don't, you'll never get anywhere. Like we can sit here and argue whether we're really sitting here. But at a certain point, you just gotta be like, okay, we are. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if you push back against those things, discussion later on down the road or will fall apart, because it'll always be, well, but what if that one thing isn't right? Then this whole tower of conversation just fell to shit. Like, if we were going to talk about gravity, or if we're talking about something like that, like you run off of those assumptions, and then when you get to the thing that you really honestly can't assume in good faith and good intellectual faith, then that's the thing that you discuss. Like you do it all. We do it every day, all day. Like you're riding off of these assumptions, and then when you get to something that you really can't assume in good faith, that's where you stop. You can't stop at every concept.
I am completely against that. We'll just leave that out now, and then you're very welcome to.
Wait, against what maybe, though?
Of stopping at every concept. Well, take gravity for example. Isn't the theory of gravity, which it's still known as, right? Yeah. No, gravity. It's general relativity. The Einstein quantum. The quantum theory of gravity is still up in the air. We haven't figured that out. All of these concepts, they're all set in stone.
General relativity?
General relativity is set in stone. Every aspect of it.
General relativity, yes.
Yeah?
But it's not like every aspect of it. It's just the theory. It's a theorem, general relativity. But yeah, that is. But there's this idea called gauge symmetry, and I don't understand it, and I can't. So I'm gonna totally butcher it right now. But essentially, the idea is the universe is the cosmos is what it is, and you can come at it at a ton of different ways, but you're still explaining the same thing. So general relativity is set in stone, yes. Now, could someone come along and say, well, no, that's not right, or there's a better way, or we could describe it in this way, and it'll be totally different, but that doesn't change that general relativity is an accurate description. It's just they're using another way to describe it just as accurately, right? So gravity is there. Yeah. Like gravity, to dispute gravity is to dispute the accuracy of all of our collective experience. Yeah. Which is, hey, maybe we're in a simulation, but that's how deep you have to go to dispute gravity.
But like,
and I would love to have that conversation.
I would too.
But that conversation at that level is its own. Anything higher than that, and you are already riding off assumptions. So the only, if you wanted to stay there, we'd never leave, because there's no way to know. And any conversation we ever start, we'll have to drop back down and be like, well, maybe we're in a simulation. Maybe this is just being fed to us, or so it's just.
But I'm trying to see if you can grasp where I'm coming from, though, right? Because now I'm starting to kind of see it a little bit more clear as we are starting to talk about this subject, because this is very interesting to me, where there is always this position that you're coming from, that there is some concreteness, at least to something.
To some things.
Yeah.
Because I would rather us both ride off that assumption so we can make it to the better conversation that lies ahead. And sometimes to get to that conversation, you have to ride off a few assumptions. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to. Now, the intelligence argument, that is far more up in the air than a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the intelligence argument is one thing. The genius argument is another one entirely. So I would say the genius argument is locked in. I would say that something very dramatic would have to happen to move my position on that. Now, intelligence is still iffy. I mean, it comes down to the old nature versus nurture argument, genes or environment. And that one's still, I mean, we know that genetics affects it. It's just how much, and affects it in a major way. It's just how much does environment. That's like where the debate really is now. Because when you get to average level intellect and plus or minus, 30%, it's a much smaller range. The people that are bona fide geniuses are so far above that you'd have to talk about, you'd have to have, if you're having the intelligence genetics discussion about geniuses, then you almost have to be talking about geniuses with other geniuses. Like, okay, they're geniuses already, but could their environment make them more of a genius or a little less of a genius, or because they're already there? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that discussion is far more open. The nature versus nurture argument on intelligence.
Interesting. What I feel is like way more interesting is just like the possibility, and I'm gonna call it a possibility. But really, I think we both know that I feel like this is like the true nature of shit, or that I believe at least that this is the true nature of things. That there is no constant, there is no like concrete anything. Like if I understand correctly of whatever article it is that I had recently read, like the theory of gravity is like, and they labeled it as such, they labeled it a theory of gravity, is still just a theory based on what we use to define anything. What's used to define a theory as opposed to a hypothesis.
Right. A hypothesis doesn't have evidence. A theory does.
Yeah.
So a theory can be proven or disproven, though.
Yeah.
The classical theory of gravity has been proven time and time again.
Yeah.
The quantum theory of gravity is still totally like.
And imagine that, because this is where my conversations start to go now. In like me believing that nothing is ever concrete. Imagine we do like delve deeper into like the quantum level of anything. Like you were just mentioning, like imagine if that level of concrete we were arguing on just gets flipped on top of our heads, and what happens to the rest of our conversation? Like,
but general relativity will, unless something changes. So right now, general relativity is true. That's not, there's nothing about it that's not concrete. Like that's as concrete as you'll ever get
for now,
in this very moment that we're speaking.
Yeah.
Something would have to physically change within the universe, within the ground level
of our understanding of it.
Or our understanding of it. But like in the physical universe that we know right now, in this room, that is how things work. Because general relativity is just math. It's just math that says this happens, like this is how things work, and it is. I mean, there's in everything we see, like there's a reason why we can send someone into space, into the moon and back, and do it with essentially out a hiccup.
Yeah, and it's the math. And with bringing math into the conversation, like, I want to ask, like, isn't interpreting math still us, like, trying to give subjectivity an objective way of viewing it? Because math doesn't use words.
No.
Math uses numbers and shit. There's no words to describe math well, there is, and that's exactly how we go about doing it. Like, we see the math, we see what it's doing, and we see that it's flowing the way that it is.
It's as concrete as you get.
Yeah, math, definitely. Then we have to do the process of interpreting that math to other people through language.
Yeah.
Where that can always be changed because we're trying to use concepts now in describing what the math is doing.
Of course. But the math is it.
Yeah, the math is there.
Like, essentially, Max Tegmark believes, or I don't know if he believes this, but it's a theory he proposed. I guess it would be more of a hypothesis. That math is the foundation. Like, that is literally what everything's made out of.
Yeah.
Like, if you go deep enough, there is nothing there, really. Like, there's nothing, like, you can go deep all the way to the elementary particles, and you can go deeper than that, and essentially it's infinite. And infinite in its complexity. Maybe not infinite in how far down you can go, like, in a straight line, but in its complexity, just totally infinite.
Yeah.
And in an infinite cosmos like that, the only thing that it really is at that point is math.
Yeah.
Like, literal math.
Yeah.
Like, not numbers in your head. It's not like the Matrix where it's all code and, like, a bunch of numbers. Like, the concept of math, it's the concept. Mm-hmm. Like, reality is the concept of math.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And then, like, I guess that would be, like, an argument against my belief of, like, there is nothing concrete. Because, well, there is a concept like math that exists.
Yeah, math is pretty concrete.
Yeah.
I wish I was better at it.
Yeah, same here. That's what I'm about to get into.
Yeah. And then I forget if we talked about this last time, but I was recently listening to Lawrence Krauss talking about quantum fluctuations, and so there's this idea of quantum fluctuations in a vacuum. And a vacuum is like a zero energy space, or like a zero matter space, but there's still energy, and it's quantum fluctuations that are causing it, and it's like little.
There's still what?
Energy.
Wow, in the vacuum.
In the vacuum, and what it is it's the zero, which literally the zero-ness of that space, splitting itself into 1 and -1. So little particles will pop out. That a particle of matter and antimatter, and because they're the positive one and the negative one, the vacuum hasn't changed. It's still zero, but it's a positive one and a negative one now. And
that's interesting.
And he argued that that creationists who always say, well, how could you get something out of nothing? Yeah. You'd have to have an eternal God for that to happen. And he said, no, that's nonsense. You can always get something out of nothing with quantum physics. Yeah. It's easy. It just splits itself into a positive and a negative. And he argues that at the very beginning of the universe, that's even if there was nothing, and
there was always something.
Even if there was nothing, it formed something by splitting into positive one and a negative one.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Because when we say nothing, we mean nothing.
Yeah.
So it's a human mind can't even understand it. So and people often talk about intuitions, how your intuitions break down when you start thinking on a cosmic level or deep time, which is the concept of how long the universe has really been around. Like, we can't even comprehend 14 billion years. There's anything that we didn't evolve, that didn't assist us in our evolution to survive, any cognitive ability or comprehension, we didn't evolve to have it because it didn't help us. So understanding deep time or understanding deep space, how big the universe really is, which is the observable universe, mind you, it's mind-boggling. It's just, you can't even understand it. Like when you look at those maps where it zooms out a little at a time to show you, like here's us, here's the galaxy, and here's a little dot, that's us. That's our solar system. Now here's our galaxy, and now the galaxy is a little dot, and now here's our supercluster, and here's and then our galaxy is a little dot, and it just keeps going out. Like 15 times it does that. Can't even understand it. So, and we're not meant to. We didn't evolve to have that ability to understand because it doesn't help us. The understanding of nothing is similar in that way. Like, we really can't understand what nothing really is, a vacuum. So when you say, well, there was nothing and then there was a quantum fluctuation and it gave you a 1 and a negative 1, people will argue, well, no, because that's something. That's like there's something for it to come into. Yeah. And the answer is no. Like the quantum fluctuations in vacuums that we're talking about are true vacuums. There really is nothing. Like, as nothing as before the beginning of the universe was. Like, the question, why is there something instead of nothing? There really was nothing. And that nothing split it, like quantum fluctuated into something. Yeah. And people can't understand it. And so they go back to, to religion. But
am I right in saying, or is this like, it's more similar to the people that you just brought up for that example? Am I right in saying that interpreting that means that there never was nothing?
No, there was.
There was nothing.
There was nothing.
There had to be nothing for the fluctuation
to happen.
Okay. But then at what point is there nothing anymore? Like the person observing this, are they watching nothing fluctuate into something? Or when they make the vacuum, is there already just a positive and a negative readily observable at that moment?
No.
So there was nothing.
Yes. They can... I'm not sure where they do the experiments, but they can make vacuums. Yeah. And there's never nothing, by the way. So as soon as they make the vacuum, there's quantum fluctuations are happening immediately. So there's never a moment where there isn't quantum fluctuations happening. Like, we're talking on on such a small scale and so often. It's a lot, Like, there's just you can never really have nothing. Like, instantly it starts to fluctuate and split itself like that. The interesting thing is when that occurs, these particles are popping into existence and destroying themselves instantly. Like, we're talking on time scales that
aren't even conceivable.
That aren't conceivable. Like, so that, like, it's a moment.
They're observable. Is it through math?
They're computers. Like, they can move faster than we can. We can't. Like, the time scales are just so small that it's just it's unbelievable.
Huh. That's interesting.
Like, a moment for a human is something like I'm not exactly sure, but it's something like a millisecond or a couple milliseconds. Like, a real each conscious moment, if you were to split it up, like how small can you really, like, observe, break it down in increments? And it's so much smaller than that, like by billion times, like something crazy like that. So that's the interesting thing, is those quantum fluctuations, they appear and disappear very quickly. But clearly this one, the one that created all of this, didn't, something else happened. But this is not to say that quantum fluctuations cause the universe. It's to say it is possible to get something from nothing. So quantum fluctuations in a vacuum are so instant. If it's that's not what happened here, because we're still here, you know.
Yeah.
But whatever did happen, here's evidence that it could have. Like, if your argument is you can't get something from nothing, well, now we know we can.
Yeah.
So that part of the climb is over. That's just
interesting.
Yeah. And then I sent you that article about what was it about? Entanglement, quantum entanglement causing the direction of time.
Oh, okay, the arrow of time.
Yeah, that is interesting too.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get into that, because I was just trying to look up the article again recently, and
basically, and to any of those listening, this is at the very edge of my understanding. I barely understand this stuff, so when describing it, I may be getting some of it wrong, although the overall message is accurate. But that article was saying that they think that quantum entanglement is what moves what moves the arrow of time, or what directs the arrow of time, and it's basically from a state of non-entanglement to more entanglement. So that's all the direction of time is.
Yeah.
Particles becoming more and more connected and entangled, and like as time moves on, that's like what's causing it.
It's pretty much saying the relation of time to matter.
Right.
Like, time doesn't
to connection.
Exist
right
without matter.
Right. And
which, I mean, like, let's think about that. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Of course.
It makes sense.
No, totally.
Like, what is time if there is no matter at all?
Yeah. No, there isn't. Time, and that was the argument, really, is that time is just something happening to matter in a progression that only goes one way. Mm. And quantum entanglement is that way. And the reason they looked into it is because when you look at classical physics, you can go backwards. You can if you could go down to particles and watch them interact in a movie and then turn it on reverse, no law is broken as it goes back. They go back and it totally adheres to classical physics. And so,
and this entanglement theory is not classical physics.
It's not. It's quantum. It's quantum. And so that couldn't cause. So that has nothing to do with the arrow of time. And it's puzzled physicists for a while, because what's pushing time in the direction it's going if it could work just as well the other way? And so they started looking for things that don't work that way. And entanglement's one of those things.
That's dope.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Imagine that. And what comes into my mind now is, like, what are those people who have, like, come across this information? Like, what are they thinking now? Like, because obviously their questions have led them to this answer. Like, questioning if there's anything that doesn't work in going back through time.
I don't know.
So, like, they have to have been asking now, well, what does this mean?
Yeah, well, I think what they were asking was, why does time move in a direction? Like, why is there time, and why does it go in a certain way? You know? Like, you never... And you know what's really interesting? So... It can go the opposite way. Even
in this entanglement.
It can go the opposite way, but the way entanglement works, quantum physics, it's all probability and weird things. So imagine if you every single movement of matter is going one way in time because of this, right? Mm-hmm. But every interaction on a quantum level is say you had to flip a coin, and if it's heads, it goes forward in time, and if it's tails, it goes backward. But it's a magic coin, and it lands on heads every time. But 1 out of like a bazillion, a number we can't even comprehend, it hits tails.
Yeah.
That's how it works. But
there's a 1 out of bazillion chance that
the probability is so low, it won't. Our universe will die before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
But it's possible. Yeah. It's possible, but it's so unlikely that it won't happen in our universe's lifetime.
Then I'm gonna.
And it's only one thing. Yeah. It would only be one single instance of something moving backward in time. Yeah.
And have they gone ahead and explored this? Have they explored this one instance out of bazillion?
Well, no, because right now I'm gonna take a guess, and you're thinking like time travel, but this isn't time travel. This is time rewind.
Yeah.
Different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're not traveling in time, you're literally rewinding time.
So, if I'm grasping this right, this is just in seeing time go back in the opposite direction.
Yes.
The only thing that's happening is whatever just happened up to that moment.
Unhappens.
Is just okay.
Yeah.
And what is that like conceptualized? Does that just mean like
it would be like so if it's quantum entanglement that's pushing it, it would be like, and I may be wrong about this, but it would be like quantum detanglement, which just doesn't happen. It's not possible. But except for that
one instance.
That one instance. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. That shit is fucking dope. But like that's why, and this is just kind of, I want to reel it back into my thing of like, no concrete anything. Because like we keep finding these new things that have the potential to flip our current understanding on its head.
Yeah.
The entanglement theory just flipped classical physics on its head with the whole time concept, at least from what I'm grasping now.
Yeah. But, it didn't flip it on. It still makes total sense. Like, the thing with classical physics was it doesn't explain time.
Yeah.
It's not that it goes against it or anything. It's just when they looked at classical physics, they saw that this is not where time's coming from. And
it took them to have to understand quantum physics to know that.
Yeah, to look into quantum physics, yes. Yeah. No one, like the math joke is, or the physicist joke is, no one really understands quantum physics. It's just so hard to comprehend. It's back to the evolutionary psychology or evolutionary cognition, where our brains are just not built to be able to understand concepts like fully understand concepts like quantum mechanics.
Not ever or not yet?
No, our brains literally, like, it's just like trying to think about what nothing really is, and like, or whatever, it's like we just can't understand that, and like you can never fully comprehend it.
Yeah.
And our brains as they are now, there's nothing, like, you can never fully grasp that concept. Now, I'd like to think that one day when we make super intelligent AI, it will be able to build itself in a way that can understand concepts like that, and pass that knowledge on to us, or pass on knowledge of how to enhance ourselves so that we can understand it as well. But
till then.
Yeah, till then.
But what about any of this is hard to understand? And I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption here that there's just nothing to relate it to, because that's pretty much the basis of human understanding, right? That we have something to relate it to. We have anything that we can conceptualize is basically us relating it to something.
Well, relating it to... Well, that's a deep question, because it really comes down to how our brains evolved. Like, our brains... Like, it's natural selection, right? So, every time a brain... Like, as we were evolving, every time a brain is formed that's better at surviving in the environment that we're in, that brain will pass its genes on, and then the next brain comes up, whatever one's better, that's the one that will get the mate with the female or the whatever and pass the genes on, and so on and so forth. Or like the female that has the brain that's better at protecting its young, that's the one that will be able to, that will have the kids, and so that the only the kids with the genes of that will pass on, and so on and so forth. So never did the gene that lets you understand quantum physics get like specifically passed on. Of course, like with the geniuses thing, that they like, that's just random. Like, that's just by chance that we get people like that. It's not because evolution pushed us in that direction. Now, maybe it has something to do with it. Like, clearly, it... Let me rephrase that. Clearly, it does have an evolutionary basis. But to that level is unnecessary. So, let's take an Einstein or a Richard Feynman and let's put them back in the beginning of our evolution. They probably would have died.
Yeah.
Now, take it a little further ahead, and maybe at that point intelligence would have assisted them, and they would have killed it. But at the very beginning, it's not going to do much for you. It's more strength, and you know what I mean? And intelligence is huge back then too, but...
In a different...
But and that level of intelligence is just... It's really not adding anything at that point. Like, you'd have to be just even beyond that smart to really use it in that type of survival way. But clearly we got more and more intelligence, so intelligence did help. But like math intelligence like that, it's just... I'm only saying that evolution didn't specifically push for that trait of like super high mathematical intelligence.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is with our understanding of anything.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, because of that, our brains literally just don't have the capacity, because any, like, the part of a brain that would have had to, like, imagine if it was, for whatever reason, imagine, like, and this is totally, like, made up, but imagine aliens came down at the beginning of our evolution, and there was this one alien, and he was just floated up in his ship, and any time someone was born, at 16, or let's say when the brain's fully developed, at 25, you can't have kids. The alien would make sure you can't have kids until you're 25, and you have to pass a test that proves that you're really good at math. And if you don't, he kills you, or he sterilizes you so that you can't have kids. And he just sat up there for the beginning of our evolution for 200,000 years and just did that for 200,000 years. We probably would have developed an entirely different section of our brain that was just made for math. Like not just like there of course is a section in our brain that's been like cordoned for math, but not like it would be if that had happened. Like you probably would have a whole different chunk that's just like there for that, and then maybe we could have like we'd actually have the tools to understand.
Yeah.
But we just don't right now. Like we need to either evolve them, which it doesn't. There's no reason to think we would, because natural selection is totally dead. Like natural selection doesn't work anymore when you have intelligence this high, because we kind of let everybody survive, you know? So we really have to take our evolution in our own hands with CRISPR or with nanotechnology or like some type of neural mechanical framework that to enhance ourselves.
What's going into the understanding of a mathematician who is making these discoveries? Because, like, I'm sure they're coming to some kind of understanding.
More than us.
I would even make an assumption that
more than us.
Even the understanding they have made that far is still, like, still pales in comparison to the potential understanding that
we could have.
No, that they can continue to gain knowledge in.
I agree.
Because the math that goes into understanding that, quantum fluctuations, I'm sure is still not even the end of the math there.
Definitely. But go back to the deep time concept or the deep space concept. That's something that we can't understand. Like, maybe those super geniuses, some of them do, but like there are some concepts where no matter how much data you get, the concept itself is incomprehensible. It's you can never fully grasp it. So we know how big the cosmos is, and astrophysicists know way more than us, and they think about it all day, and yet still, like, we're just not built to hold a map that big in our minds and understand it all at once. Like, you have to have diagrams like that keep continuously bringing it out, so you can, for a second, kind of get a glimpse of how big it is. But you never can really hold in your mind how big it really is. Or when we talk about deep time, like how long 14 billion years really is. And again, this is why religious people fall back to God, because how can something come from nothing? Evolution, we came from swamp sludge, like that's impossible. But it's because they're not understanding this concept of deep time. They don't understand quantum fluctuations in a vacuum, so something from nothing doesn't make sense to them. They don't understand deep time, so swamp sludge over millions and millions of years can easily become us, because it did, you know? But they can't understand that. Like, it just doesn't make sense to them that like, they even admit that evolution is real, but on a micro scale. Like, yeah, of course you pass traits on and, you know, like stuff like that. But they just can't grasp that. You just take that one simple concept of the people that survive are the ones that pass the traits, and extend it over millions of years, you get humans. But the extension over millions of years, you can say millions of years, but it doesn't click. It doesn't click. They don't really understand how long that really is. Like, millions of years is a long, long time.
Yeah. What is there to understand about the million years that's keeping somebody from understanding the concept that you're trying to explain with that million years? Like, do they need to understand how long a million years is?
Yeah.
Or do they just need to understand what happened in that million years
they need to
get the concept of evolution.
They need to understand what happened, but
because I look at it as like a math problem. Like an example would
totally.
An example would be recently in my math test. I'm in pre-algebra, by the way, and like just from the very outset of the equations we have to solve, if ever I do get anything wrong, there's a part in the formula that I've forgotten to do mentally that I've just overlooked or dismissed like quickly in favor of the later parts of the formula that come toward me solving that problem. And these are like big concepts, like the PEMDAS or whatever. Like that's like a huge basic concept, like basic fundamentally, but it's still huge, and that's
important.
Kind of your foundation for a lot of the later concepts you come across, at least in my pre-algebra class, and I'm gonna assume for the rest of math. It's such a big foundation, but it gets swept to the later part of your mind, the later down the line of math you go, and it tends to be something that I forego whenever I get something wrong in my math, like seeing I'm in the midst of some kind of fractional problem and I've forgotten to do some kind of multiplication or division before my addition and subtraction.
Right.
That's a failure on my part in remembering to do that. It's not that I don't understand it, but that big concept somewhere in my mind became a little concept in the bigger picture of things.
I know exactly what you're saying, and you're right, but even if you show somebody, like even if you say, okay, listen, this is how many genetic mutations happen over the course of a year. This is how many years, or this is how many, we'll do a bigger number. This is how many genetic mutations happen over the course of 100 years. This is how many of those genetic mutations can actually help. This is how many hundreds of years there were. Multiply together, and this is how many genetic mutations you had. And because of what we know in genetics, that's enough to get to where we are.
Yeah.
And then you include natural selection, where only the good traits that aren't mutations, but they're just genetic traits that are passed on, only those good traits are passed on, and slowly you're going to get an animal changing what it looks like into something that's more efficient. And even from swamp sludge, because that also has DNA, which we can see right here because we still have swamp sludge, and it has, like that has DNA, like any living thing does. And they still won't grasp it.
Here's what I think is happening when you go to describing that, because I can understand it. Like, granted, my knowledge on evolution is rusty and spotty because I don't fully know all the details of it. I can definitely say I believe it, but I think belief is also a big part of it, because in whoever's mind it is that you're trying to implant the new information, there's also the possibility that it's contradicting information there or beliefs there that are already there. So in explaining the millions of years or anything, or just introducing the concept, there's millions of years. Whoa, hold up. Sunday school said there's 2,000 years or some shit.
Yeah,
what the fuck?
Yeah, 10,000, I think.
And in this part of the conversation, we have to stop. Like, this is only the beginning of the conversation, but we have to stop right here. We have to stop because either this person is just going to be lost for the rest of the conversation, or actually, yeah, that's all that's going to happen. If they can't let go of this already ingrained belief that the world is older than what they had originally thought. So we have to stop at whatever part we're choosing to introduce new concepts. We're introducing the concept that the world is way older. Okay, hold up. Let's catch you up on how that's possible. Well, here's how we can tell that. Fucking measuring of rocks or whatever, and relation of that to other things that we've observed and shit, and just continually building these concepts. I feel like that's like a big thing of what's happening, at least in the arguments with somebody who doesn't believe in anything that you're saying.
But there are people that are scientists. Like, those people exist. Like, there are scientists that are Christian, creationists.
Yeah.
But
who are still trying to prove the existence of God. And
when they believe it down to, like,
that this is God.
Like, no. Like, the full Christian belief system. Like, they believe that the world's made 7 days and we're only 10,000 years old. And
wait, there's somebody that believes that, and they're scientists?
A lot of people, not a lot, but they're well known. Like, there are scientists out there that are Christian. Like, I wouldn't say fundamentalists, but like, they believe the fundamental Christian ideas. They believe the creation myth, and
well, that's some mental Olympics they're gonna be performing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was going to talk about this.
Like, now they're going to reform what 7 days actually meant. They're going to reform.
Yeah, and some people do that. But some people really, like, there's smart people out there that are, like, mathematicians, whatever, and they just believe in Christianity. And it's, at some point, they're like, clearly at some point they're making a misstep. Like, because to them, like, they might say, like, oh, it's just my faith, but, like, to them it makes sense. Like, to them it makes sense, or they wouldn't believe it. So to them it makes more sense that is true than what most scientists agree on. That
Christianity makes more sense.
Yes, like, that's what they like, clearly that's what they think. But there must be some, like in their minds, because you'd think there'd be some level of cognitive dissonance, which the cognitive dissonance is when you hold two opposing ideas at once, and like two opposing ideologies at once. And cognitive dissonance is interesting because it's really a feeling you get. And if approached correctly, it's evolutionarily advantageous to have cognitive dissonance, because if approached correctly, it allows you to resolve inconsistencies in your worldview. And so, like, to use a really dumb example, if you believe whatever, snakes will hurt you, but at the same time you think that it's safe, like, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, something's not right about that. Like, one of those is wrong, you know? And then you'll be like, oh, this one's the one that's wrong. Snakes are gonna hurt me. Like, I have to whatever, you know? Yeah. And it's a feeling you get, because normally it's not so simple as that. Normally it's something more complex, and it's something you don't even know that you're doing. Like, usually you're holding one ideology and you're holding another, but in a totally different way that opposes that one, and it's in a different way such that you never bring them up at the same time, so that's what allows them to exist simultaneously. But the cognitive dissonance is like, it's almost like an emotion. It's like a feeling you get, like, oh, something's not right, you know, cognitively something's off, you know, and it allows you to resolve it. But these people clearly don't have that. Like, they don't have cognitive dissonance. They like, to them it runs through. Yeah, to them the logic runs through. So they're making a misstep at some point. It's just when you talk to religious people, you can never find it because they don't want any part of it. So you can't really search with them to see where that misstep was. And one of the best experiences of my life was when I convinced my youngest sister to leave the faith, because I was the first one to go. And because of the relationship we had, she allowed me to walk her through. Like, she wasn't as resistant as like a normal person would if you're trying to convince them that everything they believe in is a lie. Normally they're just like, nah, fuck off. Like, this is my faith. Like, don't mess with this, you know? They put an unusual guard up against their religious faith, when in any other situation they would be willing to look at it logically. Politics is like that as well.
Yeah. That I feel like we're like that too.
I think we're more open than that, though.
Yeah.
Like, we'll allow the conversation, at least, you know. I think everyone's like that in some way, but this is unusually a wall that's unusually thick. And one of the best experiences was convincing my sister to that it was bullshit. Yeah. And I remember it perfectly. Like, we were sitting out. It was a nice day in the middle of summer. She was like sitting outside on a blanket she laid out in front of our apartment, and I just went out there and sat down and like went into it. Like, I went out there to like smoke a cigarette or something. I forget exactly what it was, and I was just like, listen, like, let's go through this. Like, cause I want to see where the misstep is, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but like, I broke through, you know, because her guard was down, because she knew that I was coming at it in like a loving way. Like I'm not trying to like prove to you that everything you believe is bullshit. I'm trying to save you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and once that guard was down, it was it was an hour or two, a couple hours, which for how intense religious belief is, that's nothing. Like, all it takes is for someone to allow an honest evaluation of their own beliefs, and everything that's bullshit will come to bear. And it did. And that's why I think doing that to yourself all the time is totally necessary. Like, okay, I need to come at this like I'm learning it the first time. Because when you first learn something, you only have the logical tools at your disposal. So down the line, you've picked up little things as you went, and who knows how they would have influenced your thought process back then when you first learned that one thing or decided that one thing. And so you got to reevaluate it with your new arsenal of logical weapons. You should do it as often as you can, really. Especially major things that really influence the rest of your thinking, the rest of your worldview.
I'm wondering if you can say what, or if you're aware of any like mental blocks like that, or if you have any.
I think that I have far less now than even I did a year ago. Because, I mean, my pendulum has swung. Like, my internal pendulum has swung like a motherfucker. Like, I used to be far right fundamentalist Christian. And then it swung way to the other side. Like, hyper liberal, like hyper classical liberal, which was essentially nihilistic. Like, nothing matters, there is no morality, nothing's right or wrong, do whatever you want. Like, if you want to be a serial killer, if that makes you happy, then you can do that. Be a serial killer, like, go for it. And then I swung back, but then I kind of locked into the liberal. Well, I wouldn't want to say liberal. I'll say far left. You got to distinguish. You got to distinguish between Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and left and right. They of course they have things in common, and you say that the one group of three was on one side and the other group, but there's different.
Yeah.
So I moved from the nihilistic to the left, to where it's like equal rights, this and that, you know. What's the other thing that was big? Like, just for example, like, I was pretty much a socialist, and like the like back then, if me from back then was here now, I'd be like, on like this whole transgender thing going on, I'd be like, they need, like, they are who they say they are. It's a social construct. This and, you know, gender is a social construct. But now I like to think that I settled more in the liberal intellectual, is like what I like to call myself now. So I am certainly liberal, but there's conservative, Republican, right ideas that I don't shut down just because it's coming from that side. I'll still evaluate them as if they were coming from someone that I totally trusted, or I mean, someone that I totally trusted. You know, I'll take it like that, because, you know, when you're talking to someone that you trust, whose intellect you trust, you're open to it, and you're like, okay, like, you know, you don't want to be too open, but you're at least you're open to it. Like, you're ready to be convinced if they do find an opening with whatever logic they're throwing at you. And I think the last thing to go was the morality aspect. Even that now I've tweaked. Like, that was still in like the nihilistic range. Like, I was a moral nihilist forever. And like not too long ago, definitely within the past year, I've kind of changed my tune on that, where I think that there is space for morality even in a universe without a God. Because that originally was where I landed, where if there's no God, there's no morality. There can't be. Like, because there's no cosmic law that states what's good or bad. It's not like a law of gravity. Like, there's no physical law that says what's good or bad, so there can't be good or bad, really. But I all that time I forgot to take account of subjective experience and how that affects things. Because through an experiential lens, of course there's good or bad. I mean, someone's suffering,
Yeah,
that's bad. It's bad. Yeah, it's bad. If you're gonna make a word that's good, that's called bad, and a word that called good, that's what bad means. Like, is suffering. And so when you look through it through that lens, it's a lot. I do believe there is some form of morality that there is a moral compass and that we can kind of follow.
Yeah.
But back to your question, the reason I went through that is because that most recent major change in my worldview really showed me how open I was, because I was a moral nihilist to the core. And when I heard the argument to the contrary by someone, and this mattered too. It was Sam Harris.
Yeah.
By someone that I think extremely highly of, I was like, what the fuck? Like, he's wrong. And like, how, basically he's wrong. And like, this is going to sound...
My God is wrong.
Yeah. And yeah, this is going to sound like fanboy-y, but like, it was essentially...
It's going to sound religious.
He's wrong, but... Well, no, because a religious person would say, no, he's right. Like, he's God, There's a big difference. But it was essentially, he's wrong. How could that be? Like, where did he misstep, basically? Like, where was his logical misstep? And so I dove back into the morality problem. And he didn't convince me until I realized that I was thinking about his argument wrong. So I thought, I kept going back to, there is no cosmic law of morality. And then, so how could he be saying that there was a morality if there isn't one, And the way that he put it that finally convinced me was, he said, basically, and to those saying, well, why is suffering bad? Like, who says suffering is good or bad? If we can't agree that suffering is bad, then what the hell are we doing? And that was like, oh, okay, so that's the angle he's taking. Like, he's not really saying there's a cosmic law of morality, like that there really is a good or bad. He's saying, if we're going to say good or bad, it has to be suffering. Yeah, I mean, what else is there? And so I would say I'm still a moral nihilist, but I'm still a moral nihilist, but
maybe not in the classical sense of morality.
Yeah. I'm a moral nihilist, but I'm actively a moral realist.
Yeah.
So it's not like I believe there's a cosmic law of morality, but I believe that having a moral construct is important, something to move towards or away from.
Yeah.
In our decisions, So I think that's important, and as long as we admit that it is a construct, then I have no issues with it, and I think it's important.
That's interesting that you see your, because the original question was just like, do you see yourself having any blocks?
Yeah.
And you kind of seeing your growth as kind of like a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
From one side to the other, and just from an outside perspective, your pendulum swing doesn't sound so much one-dimensional as it is maybe like...
I was just going to say, yeah.
Like...
I was just going to say, the pendulum of a individual's ideology is more like a ball. It's more like a sphere
in a free moving space.
In a circle, yeah. So a sphere hanging in a bowl, and it can go to any edge of the bowl. Yeah. That's more what it's like.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it sounded like with your growth.
Yeah.
And for mine too, if I could speak on it is like I don't know if I would describe my growth as so much as a pendulum. Like it looking back on it, there was a block before, and it was more of like it's interesting because it kind of relates back to philosophize this and just the environment that we're in, because I was in an environment that I couldn't see out of and couldn't conceptualize much out of.
Me too.
And then but there was still like parts of myself that even today, at least in my mind, I feel like are still true. And this is kind of where I'm kind of like struggling to put this into a concept, because it wasn't so much of a pendulum swing. I would say maybe like a growth out of a bud or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Where maybe there was like some low-hanging branch that was covering my sunlight, and then I just grew just a little bit to the right where I was able to get enough sunlight, and then keep growing from there. But like I still have my root back to that spot
Right.
that I grew out of.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And what I'm trying to say out of that is that I feel like I've always been right. Just any concepts I had before weren't fully grown from that moment. Like I feel like I had my mind right from the beginning.
So there's nothing that you oh, and to be clear, even now my situation, I'm not locked in.
Huh.
Like I'm just far more I'm very wary of opposing concepts.
Yeah.
But I'm like, now that I moved my basis to logic, then I'm still able to I can still change.
Yeah.
It's just it has to be from logical argument. But what you were saying, oh, and so what I wanted to ask was you've never changed like you've never had like a dramatic ideological change?
Yeah. From what I can like,
you haven't, or you have?
No.
Oh, okay.
I want to say from like what I can remember right now, I don't know if there's ever been a moment in my life where like I had changed from one position to like the exact opposite later on down the line. Because any revelation I did have growing up, it was more of I did have my oh shit moments, but any oh shit moment I had was more of oh, that just connects to this piece. Oh shit. And that, I guess that'd explain the whole like my growth thing instead of a pendulum swing.
Right.
Because it just connects back down to my root. Like,
well, it sounds like you didn't start with like
with all the pieces that I have now, at least. Like,
no.
Was more of a.
Well, yeah, but it sounds like you didn't start with a specific ideology. Like in that you like started.
I feel like I did have an ideology, because even in the whole Christian thing, there was still a part of me that was still inquisitive. I remember I used to ask my parents about all these different gods while we were going to church. And I think I would credit I would credit my parents with this, because they were open to my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, that's massive.
Yeah.
Most people don't get that.
It is super dope, man. Like, because I'm over here questioning, like, because I'm already aware. Like, what about Buddha? What about these Hindi gods and shit where there's, like, person with 7 arms? Like, I remember I had this question about, like, is there a place where God and all these other gods exist? And my dad entertained it. Like, he was like, Yeah, that's possible. And granted, my dad, I think, was still going to school at this time, and he's
So that's a different type of. That's a different type of Christian.
yeah.
You know, that's like the Christians that I'm used to would never. They would say, no, that's not how it is.
Well, and that's not to like say that my dad didn't have his moments like that, because like and my mom during these moments too, she was a little more soft spoken and didn't say too much along those lines, but she was very supportive of my dad in anything that he did. And so anytime that he would go with or at least the things that like seemed right to everybody. So if my dad was like going towards like something that would be productive, like entertaining a concept of all the gods living together, like my mom would be behind that.
Right.
And she didn't have to say anything towards that. But if ever my dad was like maybe this might sound disconnected from the concept, but he'd be like, stop listening to that fucking hip hop or some shit, like, or stop reading those devil books or whatever. Like, he would have these moments where he'd flip.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and in my mind, I still like have my dad as this person who's like open to these concepts. So when he has those moments of flip, I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Where'd that come from? And like, and that's just to say that my dad wasn't always that way. He just has his moments, and it's always such a trip to think about that. But
I wish that I had the mind I have now back then, because I remember growing up in church and asking questions like, why do we believe the Bible instead of some other religion? Like, why is this the one that makes?
And did you go and openly ask that question?
Oh yeah. And I was like, why is this the one that is right? Like, how do we know that this is the one that's right? Because when you like, because sometimes I would hear them talk about other religions and like make fun of them, and not in like a real vicious way, but just like, oh, haha, they believe in all these gods, and like I remember being like having a moment, and even I didn't leave the faith, like I didn't really stop believing until years after this, but even then, like a little seed was planted, like my inquisitive nature, and I remember asking, like taking a step back and looking at the Christian ideology and stories in the Bible, and asking and thinking, why is this more believable? Like, why is this not funny? You know? And I remember asking, and they always were so proud of me, because they like, oh, like these are good questions to be asking, and like they just never thought like that it was going to lead out, you know? Because to them it was just like there were answers to all these questions, you know? And like answers that
were concrete
that shut it down. And there just weren't. So like the Bible thing, or the other religions question, their response would be, well, it's because the Bible is so old, and it's the only book that stayed the same throughout all these centuries and thousands of years, and no other book was like this, and it survived and like stayed complete. And that was the response, that was the answer. And if come to find out years later, it's not like that at all. It's changed 1,000 times. The Buddhist texts are just as old, and they were transferred orally for 500 years before they were written down. Like that's far more impressive, you know? And the Hindu texts were way before that, and just as long. The ancient Vedic texts, just as long. There's the Egyptian religions, or the Greek mythology, any of that. Like, Greek mythology is a little more recent, but you get the point. Like, that's not the case. So when I found that out, I was like, and many more things like that, I realized that all these questions that I had apparently gotten answers to, I really none of those answers held up under the weight of true logic. And so eventually logic became my god, because I realized that was the only thing that you can that's the only tool you can really use to get to the truth.
Yeah.
There isn't another tool. You can't. Faith doesn't get you to truth. It gets you. Faith doesn't actively get you to truth.
Yeah,
Faith can get you to truth, but by luck alone.
Yeah, only by luck.
And even then, you don't know. You can never really know if you really have gotten to the truth. Logic is the only thing that does that. That's why I think that formal logic should be taught as a separate class in school, like from early on. I think that philosophy should be a mandatory class from elementary through high school, and I think that logic should be a logic and media literacy that kind of wound into the same. Like there should be an aspect of the logic class. Like each year, it should be logic, colon, and then whatever class you're taking. So like maybe sophomore year you would take logic, formal logic, and then junior year would be logic, media literacy. But like that should be taught from elementary through high school as well. If we taught logic and philosophy from elementary all the way through, or at least high school, from freshman to senior year, we still can't teach religion in school.
Well, here's what I want to know. Because when I think about logic, like, what is more logical than math?
No, that's what formal logic is.
Yeah.
It's like in math there's a whole separate department or of subsection of math called logic. That's what formal logic is. Like proofs. Remember proofs?
Not really.
Like where it would be, you'd get some axioms and then you'd have to take those axioms and say, well, because of this and this, therefore you have this, and because of this and that, therefore you have this.
That's a form of math?
Yeah, that was a major aspect of math. It's called proofs is what it was when I learned it in high school, but it goes even further into formal logic, and it's like there's like a special type of like symbols and stuff that you use that like mean different things, that like therefore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's so important, and like if you get people good at that, then, because it's math, but it's more than math.
Yeah.
It's so just learning math isn't going to get you there, and just learning science or anything, English isn't going to get you there. You really need it as a separate class.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, because it
needs to be mandatory.
I feel like that's the whole purpose of education, is to teach, if not logic, like some form of logic in more specific areas, because like with math we can already see that people already aren't like on that way to logic, and I think there's a reason for that.
No one cares.
Yeah, but also it's just like how everything is connecting. I want to maybe use an example for how it is connecting everything and how you can possibly get logic out of it. And that's with my English class that I'm taking right now. It's it's very philosophical the way he's going about it, and it's made me question why the hell are we like this having these kinds of discussion in an English 28 course when I don't even know how to write a thesis yet. But it's less of the subject we're talking about and more of the direction that it's going in, because in having us be as
Or how you're talking about it.
Yeah, in having us be as involved in the conversation as we are in these classes. Everybody in this class is like super involved in it, at least all the way up until this last day. Like, in having us get that involved, he's able to better teach these other concepts of English, like how to write a thesis, in order to better portray the position you've taken on this conversation. Well, you have to present it in a better way than how we're having it in class, and writing a thesis is how you're going to be able to do that. But whether the other people in class have gotten that, or they're just like, I'm just trying to pass this shit, man, I don't give a fuck about the thesis.
Right.
Which I feel like it's a shame, because a lot of these people we're having such a good discussion in this class. It's a shame that they're letting the other steps of the class go to waste, like how to write a thesis. They're not getting that. They're just enjoying the conversation, and in the rest of the class, they're like struggling their ass off and sweating about the next due date. But they should really be using the conversation in class to better further these other aspects that the teacher has integrated into the lesson.
Well, you should be doing that with every experience you can.
And I feel like that's the way that, or I would hope that's the way that the education system set out to go about teaching logic, because like that would be the reason why like a polymath exists, or why they push education so much on an athlete, because it all connects.
The interesting thing about logic is that you don't need, it's one of those things where once it's learned, it's not something that you can avoid using. It's like not something, I mean, you can, but
you even if you can,
it becomes a part of the way you think, a part of your mind. And so even if like you said, even if you can, you're gonna be thinking,
you're gonna be aware of the
that it's not. You're gonna say this doesn't make sense, and most everyone, even those most deeply rooted in ideas, that when they truly, honestly, to their own selves think this doesn't make sense, there's no way to erase it. You know, once you know, like you can't unknow the logical
logical progression of anything.
Yeah, you can't unknow the like logical significance of certain facts, and at least you're gonna know that, and that would change so much, because some people would just be like, oh my god, I'm just gonna stop thinking about it, and they'll know, but they'll listen to. But a lot of people will be like, oh my god, I gotta look into this more, and we really should be. And like you said, it's one of those things too where it will naturally, it has naturally far-reaching qualities. Learning logic.
Yeah.
You know?
And I feel like with the education system trying to teach logic in any way, like there are already people I feel like that are like, I mean, of course they've been fighting for it, but like it really starts to become more obvious, like as we're going through this conversation about like teaching logic in class. Like what is necessary in order to get people to think about it. Because, like, I'm a bit more convinced already that trying to teach logic in itself is maybe not going to get the results that you would hope for.
But if you got kids, but that's the beauty of logic. If you teach, first of all, there's so many levels. So even if it was just formal logic, it could be formal logic 1, formal logic 2, formal logic 3, formal logic 4. Because there's higher logic where it gets more and more complex.
Yeah.
And if you made it mandatory and you made it a requirement and you needed it to graduate, then it would, it's just like English. Well, like English, you have English 1, 2, 3, 4 in high school, like each year you have English and you have to take it. It would be the same way. And if you learned it enough to pass the class, you have integrated those ideas or those concepts. Yeah. So no matter what, like your brain can now think in that way. And you could even have it just formal logic 1, 2, 3, and then 4 could be formal logic practical applications. And you start to go out and like look at certain things. But the issue is when you start getting into that territory, here's the thing. The reason why I'm suggesting we do formal logic instead of some other way is because it's kind of like a secret, it's kind of like a DL, like a down low back door into getting kids to think more logically. Because if you go at it in any type of direct way, I mean, you can't even teach a religion's as massive as religion and spirituality is in a human life. You can't learn it in school because parents don't want their kids learning about other religions. Like mostly Christians, like don't want there's enough Christians in the United States where they push back hard enough where you can't have like a mandatory religions class because they don't want their kids learning about other religions. Even though that idea of religion, like I hate religion, but like the idea of it is the most important thing you could ever learn. Like, what is this about? Like, what is this life for? What's the meaning of it? That's why I say even philosophy, but this for the same reason, it couldn't ever be a mandatory class because there'd be too much pushback.
Well, here's the thing.
I don't want my kids learning about these ideas. I don't want my kids learning about Nietzsche and Kierkegaard.
Yeah, the thing with demanding a formal logic thing is like it sounds like just regular public school in general, and like we see how that goes with demanding a kid stays in class. But
we don't do that enough though.
Here's what I want to get at in bringing up the religious aspect and noticing that it's not in any schools, but it's still such a big part of our society. I want to take a look at why it is still such a big part of our society and why these subjects in school aren't as much, or religious or religiosity or whatever is just as big as the subjects we are teaching in school, like just as well known. And I'm going to make the assumption here and say that it's because of the subjectivity of religion. Because anybody who is brought under that, their teachers are right there. It's their parents. It's the community. They have such a personal experience with that education. Right. And that's where I feel like logic would have to be, or not even logic, just education.
No, totally.
Yeah.
But
like demanding it, I don't know, would be.
But they're not getting a real, like those aren't their teachers, because teachers present ideas in an objective way. They present facts. When you're learning when you're learning Christianity from your parents, you're only learning Christianity, and you're only learning, like this certain stuff is true and whatever.
Let's take a look at what are the objective things that they're bringing forth in school. They're bringing forth, like, in English, or I guess in English or science.
Yeah.
Like, what are they using that's objective to teach them? Well, they have physical subjects there. You have a fucking frog to dissect.
Right. Yeah.
You can see when a chemical reacts with another chemical.
But even without that, like, we have
in
here's
math,
the formulas, here's the things,
you can see it working into each other. Well, in that, with Christianity, of course, it's like once you're like well educated, these no longer stand up. But as a kid, that's all you know. These are the objective things when you are being taught this by your parents. Why is God real? Well, because the Bible says so. Who's there to teach you otherwise? Nobody. Your teachers are right there.
But those aren't objective facts. Like,
because we know that now.
But they never were.
Yeah.
We just believed them to be.
Yeah, in that moment as a kid who doesn't know anything other than that moment.
But in a class, the teacher would be like, there's a religion, it's called Christianity. They believe there are many different sects. The main one that's active in this country is this. It believes this, this, and this. There's a religion, it's called Buddhism. There's many different sects. The main one is this. It believes this, this, and this.
Yeah, in a religion class.
It would be that would be the religion class. But I think that we need to radically reform our public education system.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that a major change needs to be, we need to start preparing kids for, because your parents teach you and whatever, but you spend a lot of time in school.
Yeah.
So it's really your teachers too. Like, you're being raised by both. And
but there's a connection difference there.
No, totally. But still, we need to start preparing kids, not, like, first of all, like, not just for, like, the main things, the math, science, English. Like, we need to start preparing them for life. Yeah. Like, and what life, like, is, or what we know, and, like, all that stuff. And like, there needs to be, that's why philosophy, I think, is major. Like, scrap religion, philosophy, and we'll include religion in it. Like, that's all it is really anyways. You know, it's just a philosophy. And the only difference is that they have these wild beliefs, but you could include it, you know, like, make a name that's, like, come up with a name that covers it all, and that'll be a different year or whatever. Because I'm talking about something that should be a class every year of your schooling. But, and that's why I think like, it's not like you're running out of stuff to teach, and logic is the same way. Like, if you taught logic from a young age, our ratings for education in the United States are horrible. So, like, we're not pushing, like, kids are leaving school not knowing anything, and, like, we need to change that somehow. And a huge thing is parents, like, they're just not raising their kids to, like, they're raising their kids to have no hunger for knowledge. So they just, and this is how I saw it too. Like, school is just school. Like, you just go and you have to do it and you learn stuff and, like, you whatever. Like, there's never any motivation of, like, you get to go to school. Like, how awesome is that, you know? Like, you get to go and just learn stuff from people that went to college already and learned all this stuff. Like, no, we don't embed any hunger for knowledge, any thirst for knowledge in our children, and that needs to be there. But so a big part is the parents, but another big thing is from the beginning
of school.
Yeah, from the beginning of school, we just kind of push them through. Like, they just if we need to develop a system where we can lift these kids up, even in the absence of total shit parents. And I'm not saying total shit parents and parents that don't love their kids, but total shit parents in that they just don't teach their kids to have this hunger for knowledge or for education. And somehow and they don't push their kids at home, you know? So, look, we need to develop a system where kids can't just skate by from beginning to end. Because that's what I did. And it had drastic effects on my life. Like, I had to play major catch-up for the first, like, 10 years, pretty much, after high school. Like, the past 10 years, I've just been playing catch-up, you know? And it's 2018 now, right? So this June will be my 10 years out of high school. And
oh, you haven't gone to college?
No. I did, but I didn't graduate. But 10 years out of high school.
Oh.
So those 10 years, I was just playing catch up from not learning anything like that I really needed my whole life before that. And like, yeah, you can blame my parents, you can blame anyone, but if you're going to have public education, that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be happening. Like, I just skated through, and you shouldn't be able to skate through. You should be able to, like, we have to develop a way where kids, if they aren't learning what you're teaching and they are capable of learning, there needs to be some measure where or some protocol to make sure that they do, or you're fucked, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we would do it, because the only thing that's coming to my head right now is don't let kids pass. But then you're just gonna have a bunch of high school dropouts.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you take, like, how do you put that hunger for education into a kid when they're not getting it from home?
I have the conclusion.
You have the answer? I
have the answer.
Wow.
Yep. I had brought it up earlier in the conversation. Like, it was a little part of it, but subjectivity and, like, tending to the individual rather than the class. I think this has been a subject that is well known now, that the size of the classroom matters.
Definitely.
Yeah, because that's going to be where a lot of difference in learning capability is going to be apparent. You're going to see half the classroom not grasp onto, maybe even more than half the classroom not grasp onto a concept. And then the few kids sitting up front are going to get all the info and then go have what's necessary to go on to the next level. And in that, I think public education goes ahead and moves that entire class along with those few that do. And now those few are taking this whole class with them, even though the rest of the class doesn't grasp this concept. And that's kind of where, like, school starts to get fucked up, because they're constantly introducing new concepts in
right.
spite of the fact that nobody has grasped the old ones yet.
Right.
They're not teaching to the individual or subjective level. And I think that's...
and they only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah, they're really catering to these, like...
It's standardized.
Yeah, these weird restrictions of, we only have this amount of money for this amount of people to teach and this amount of resources to allocate towards books or, like, classroom size or building size. And this all plays into whether a kid gets placed into a smaller classroom setting, like an AP class or something, or one of those bigger classes full with the idiots and the smart ones, and the smart ones taking all the idiots with them and giving them more of a chance to drop out in the future levels of school because they don't grasp any of the concepts from the previous class now.
Or worse, the smart kids are bored out of their minds, and they do worse, and they can't get the extra attention they need to be challenged because they're focusing on the kids that aren't as smart, so that they can get them to at least pass, so the teacher doesn't get in trouble for having kids that like a bunch of kids that are failing. And I think we can agree that the main issue, the main hurdle, the first hurdle is money. We need need a bigger educational budget.
There's multiple. I'm gonna say there's multiple Here's what.
But that's the first hurdle. You can't do anything without that.
Here's where I'm drawing inspiration from. Philosophizes this is whole School of Frankfurt explanation, where he kind of just like drew everything in together, and just showed how everything is connecting. Because we also have to take into consideration that, like I said, the parents from the outset. Like, education starts there from the moment you exit the womb and learn how to fucking breathe and get coddled into knowing what to do, into your first steps and taking a dump in the toilet and what to do around the house and how to logically think about what to do anytime a problem arises. Like, if we're going to try to tackle education, like, that seems like the most logical point to begin at from the parents. But then how do you get the parents? And that comes from how you build your society and what you focus your society on.
But you're speaking of it as if you can start from the ground.
No.
And because you can't. You
that's
have
what I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of things. I'm working backwards right now. From schooling, sure, but there are things that are happening outside of school that we need to consider, because education is something they've implanted in order to try to fix that problem.
Right.
But there are other things that we have to take into consideration. So I'm walking us back right now. We have the parents who are teaching this sort of way. They're religious already from the outset.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Or just totally uninterested in intellectualism.
Yeah, and don't promote any kind of logic, or just like telling the kids, like, do whatever the fuck you want, or we don't believe in a God, but you can just do whatever. I'm going to go drink a beer or something. And
well, let's be fair. There are plenty of parents that are totally great parents. They're not like that at all. And yet they themselves have no hunger for knowledge or education. And so they support their families. They're great mothers and fathers. They love their kids. Their kids are quote unquote happy, but they just have no interest in education or
educating their kids
or intellectual ideas. And
I feel like, and I'm pretty sure you do too, that's kind of a fault.
That's like the most important thing.
Yeah, if you aren't making it important to your kids that thinking logically is like a huge thing in your life. From
not just logically either, but thinking higher.
Yeah.
You know? So, like, it doesn't just have to be logic. I think that's extremely important to intellectual discussion. But not just logically, but thinking about, like, the meaning of life and thinking about philosophy and thinking about the cosmos and, like, just higher thinking, you know? Like, that, like, that's what you need to have a passion for, just higher thinking. You shouldn't be satisfied with average thinking, which is, like, just, you know, everyday bullshit, you know?
Yeah. And with just all of that, trying to embed those values into your kids, just you start to see where the problem is starting to draw from at the further back you go.
But how do you? But you can't fix it that way.
By going
to the parents.
No, I'm going past the parents now, because the parents were brought up in a society
but you can't
that promotes certain values now.
You can't fix the society either.
Because what is society focused on?
Well, because it's already locked in.
Yeah, by the values of the individual. What do individuals value?
What?
Well, what do we value? Like, we have people who are running around trying to survive. And how do you survive in society in general? Just by accumulating wealth.
Right.
And so we're promoting these values of money and trying to get ahead and survive by ourselves without actually giving it some thought and seeing where the problem is in that logic will get you to survive in this society. These people are missing that and just thinking, whoa, money or something else will help me survive. And this is continuously running through society and through parents, and parents embedding it in their kids, and the kids going through school having these new concepts go up against the concepts they're learning at home, and keeping them from understanding as they're now being catapulted through these next few classes that are just furthering these new concepts against the concepts already ingrained in themselves. And then you get a society that is full of people who are like at a block or something. Like they're running up against a wall of their concepts running opposed to concepts that will actually help.
So I agree with all of that. But my point is that is the reality we live in.
Yeah.
And if you go to any of those root causes, they're unmovable. They're immovable at this point. That the parents, the people, the society, that's how it is. So you're not going to change it this generation. The only way to change it is to change the minds of those that will be the next generation to inherit the world. And you're not going to change the parents' minds to teach them differently. So the only opening I see is in public education. And if we dumped all our money into public education and reformed it and developed it the best that we could, then at least the society that created the parents that teach the kids, when they get to the public school, we have an opportunity there. I don't see an opening in any of those other places. The only opening I see is in public education to change the future.
Here's where I see it, an opening. Because I'm going to take you, for example. When was the last time you were in school?
College, you mean?
Yeah.
Years ago. A couple of years ago.
And you are like at a level right now that a lot of people aren't at, logically. And from my own observations, that's because the information or anything you need to improve upon your own logic or way of thinking about things is as open as it is at this time in our lives. And I think we're already in the motions of seeing our society get better with it but we're only in the very outset of it, the very like beginning of it, and maybe further down the line we'll see the fruits of our labor. But right now, whatever group of people set these wheels into motion, at least from my mind, from my observations, I can kind of see like that. Like I can kind of see it like working. There are some things right now that are threatening to like hinder that growth with like net neutrality or things that would hope to hinder the freedom of information that we do have out here. But I think that's the answer. That's the other opening. Education is a big one because that's going to be a necessary motion in this wheel that's turning. But I feel like the amount of information that's free for you to come across at all at any time,
well, that should be incorporated into
education.
Yeah, because the reason that I'm so on the public education is because that would be that is a time where, as a child, when you're still very moldable, where you just go for that reason.
Yeah.
And that was, boom, 8 hours a day for years and years. That is what it's for. Like, it's set aside for that. And the reason that is so sacred to me is because you'll see in every other opening, it immediately gets ravaged by capitalism. And not that I'm against capitalism, but that mentality of how can we use this to make money. And you already see, like, how many people really use the internet for the freedom of information? How many people are on there educating themselves?
Well, it depends what kind of education you're talking about.
Educating yourself on the newest internet celebrity.
Yes,
because that's what it is. Like,
and that's what at least our current society is like pushing. The same society that's pushing the parents to.
No. We're not pushing. We are free falling.
Yeah, sure. Call it what you want, but that's kind of what is like being pushed out here. And it's not even like a deliberate push. It's just more of a, hey, check out what I like.
Well,
oh shit, I like that too.
In a way it is, though. Because the way that these
because
the way these social media sites were designed and are continually being redesigned is to grab your attention.
Yeah, cater to what is already like liked by the majority. That's all they do. That's what business is. They're catering to what you already were into. And imagine information that is as free as it is now. Maybe even more free. And the way you would make it more free is to make it a little bit more accessible.
But it's really not.
And by accessible, I mean not. By accessible, I mean, how do you get somebody to understand these concepts better? Because I feel like that is how you get information or get these people to learn even more than they do. Like, they go and learn about these celebrities because that's interesting to them. They're able to grasp that concept. There's something about that they were able to relate to, and they were able to grasp that easy. Now, if you're able to do the same thing with math or English or philosophy or anything, I feel like that would receive the same kind of reaction in people tending towards these higher forms of thought than worshiping celebrities. And I think with trying to make information more free, you have to make it more accessible like that. So by accessible, I mean like really relate to the individual. Like that's what's happening when you are lacking that in the classroom, because you're unable to relate that to the individual, and so they fall off.
Right, but knowledge needs to be more attractive than just
Yeah,
relating.
that's just
because
that's what I just said.
yeah, because the way that they have designed these attention attractors online.
Yeah, it's colorful, it's flavorful, it catches your eye.
And it's like a drug. So it's not just because giving people what they want isn't necessarily what a person needs, you know? So it's like people like the feeling of heroin, but it's not good for you, you know?
But it's, what is it that heroin is giving you? Like, what's happening in your brain that is...
Well, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like, they did tests, and when you go on Facebook and you see that you have a bunch of likes, you literally get an injection of dopamine.
Yeah.
Like a release of dopamine in your brain.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And because the information is there.
Yeah.
You know, it's
you just got to make it relatable.
But what do you mean by that? Because people because knowledge isn't always going to be relatable. It just
it can be. It definitely is not always going to be, but it definitely can be. Like, it's the reason why you and I are able to talk the way we can, because at some point in our self-education, we were able to relate to the information.
But that's not true, because some of it has nothing to do with me, and I'm still interested in it.
It's relatable. You were able to grasp the concept in some way.
Oh, wait. So I think you're using the word relatable in a different way than I'm thinking. Because I'm thinking relatable as in, like, I can somehow relate it to my life.
To your life, yeah. No. But...
That's not what you're saying.
At some point, it's going to relate back into your own life. That's what knowledge is going to... That's what knowledge in general is going to do. That's what logic in general is going to do. Because at some point, you're going to find yourself talking about some shit that if you just leave the conversation at that point and try to relate it back to your current physical life, you're going to be like, what the fuck? This has nothing to do with me. But you follow the conversation back enough, you're going to see where you came from. You're going to see the relation it has to everything. And I think that's, this kind of goes back to our earlier part of the conversation where we were talking about understanding. Like, that's what's needed, because sure, we may not be able to grasp 1,000,000 years. We can definitely grasp what is happening in those 1,000,000 years, because we're able to relate certain concepts that we already know to these new concepts of what's happening in those 1,000,000 years. DNA has to have randomly mutated and then come into physicality in the real world, and then watch itself become decimated through natural causes, and ones that were actually useful continue down the line. Well, if anyone aside from me is able to describe that in way better and more relatable terms, that is going to be where learning happens.
I see what you're saying, but I think we need to go at it at an even deeper level, because knowledge worth learning is not always going to be that way.
Not relatable?
Not always in a short enough timeline that you can convince someone or show them to where they would want to learn it. Like, there needs to be some intrinsic hunger for knowledge in general because I see where you're going with that, and I agree. Like, everything I've learned, it somehow helped me understand something else, or just kept my momentum of learning going, and kept me sharp and fresh psychologically. But for some people, there's no way to see that. Like, even for a long time. Like, there's tons of things. I mean, that's the age-old argument from high school kids. I'm never going to use this again. Why am I? That's the age-old argument. And they're right, like, most of the time they're right.
Yeah.
They're not going to.
And look at what's happening in the kid who says that. I'm never going to use this ever again in my life. Whatever process he said that in, he was in that part, and he stopped, and he looked at where he is in that current situation, and then he asked that question. He didn't stop there and then trace his path back and go, oh, okay, I see how I got to it.
Right.
There wasn't a reintroduction back into the previous steps. Where maybe somebody may have reintroduced those previous steps back, but he himself stopped right there and he stopped right there, looked at that concept, looked at his current situation, and that question immediately comes up.
But even if you look to the future, even when they look to the future, they're not seeing any use for it. And they might, and they're right a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth learning. Mm-hmm. Like, there needs to be an intrinsic thirst for knowledge, so that in that situation, so a kid will think, I'm never going to use this again, but damn, is it interesting, but I want to learn it still. Somehow that needs to be taught. That thirst for knowledge needs to be ingrained.
Yeah.
And
I would say it needs to be relatable.
I don't know what you mean by that.
It needs to be related.
Yeah, but what do you mean by related? Sometimes knowledge just isn't. Sometimes knowledge just isn't.
You can't. Let's think about like some stuff that just may never relate, but we're gonna do it like real easily. The whole quantum fluctuation. Yeah. How does that relate back?
Doesn't.
Why is it interesting?
Like, the reason we can't understand stuff like that is for the same. It's interesting because it
makes something out of nothing.
Yeah, it's conceptually interesting. It's. I mean, that's a good point, though. You have landed on a good point here, because why is it? Because that's the key.
Yeah.
Why is it interesting? It's conceptually challenging. You have to think.
I wouldn't go so. I feel like when you say conceptually challenging, that depersonalizes the information. When you told me that, I didn't think of it as like, yo, this is exercise for my brain here. This is dope.
Well, no, of course you're not. Of course you're not. But it
There's
is.
a relation there.
But it is, though.
That you like the concepts of nothing and something, and then what you used to solve something coming out of nothing. You were able to pose pictures for me, concepts that we both could relate to, and use that to describe something coming out of nothing.
Right. Now, you absolutely need to relation to explain things. That I agree with. But to find them interesting, I don't think so.
I think that is super interesting, especially because I think that's inherently interesting to everybody. I think everybody has pondered
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
question, where did we all come from?
Yeah.
At least once.
Definitely. But
But
the reason...
at most, I would see not even the least. I think at least like 50 times they've pondered where we come, even unintentionally.
Yeah. But there's a reason why those concepts are interesting, and there's a reason why way more stuff is interesting to me than some kid who doesn't care. So that difference,
because he wasn't able to relate,
is what that has nothing to do with it. It doesn't, because there's people that are in the same exact spot as me, and I can explain it the same way, and it doesn't matter.
If you explained it the same way you did to me, it's because they didn't get the concept you used to explain that concept.
Yeah, but the reason why they find it interesting, there are things that I can't relate to. That has nothing to do with anything with me. Like,
in your current situation, of course.
Comprehension, relating is necessary for comprehension. It's how we comprehend anything. Totally on board with you on that. But
that's also what drives our interests.
I don't think so. Like, there are things that have nothing to do with me, and yet I still find it interesting. Like the
relation of concepts,
the mystery of a black hole. Yeah, but that has the mystery of a black hole. To understand that, I have to use concepts I can relate to.
Yeah.
Or I don't, not that I can relate to, but that I use like a relational understanding to understand it. Like, okay, so it's like that, and that's how I understand certain things.
Here's what I think.
But the interest doesn't come from that.
I think the interest comes from having your concepts that you already have relating to other concepts. You're literally showing this person that they know this already. Because you're relating their concepts to this new concept.
But what about all the things that I relate to that I'm not interested in at all?
What are you relating to that you're not interested in?
I mean, anything. Like, you can relate to anything.
And you wouldn't be interested.
Yeah. Like, there are...
Oh, yeah, like the people at work. Like, you're just not interested in that.
Yeah. Like...
But are you really not interested in that?
I'm really not. And the Kardashians? Definitely not.
Well, sure. The concept of just the Kardashians. Like, that is unrelatable. But now let's dig into why people like the Kardashians. Like, the question is why. And when you get into why, I feel like that's where it gets interesting. Why do you like the fucking Kardashians? Well, Kim does this or some shit. And she acts this way when presented with this situation. And fucking Rob, whoever, he reacts this way. And I'm able to relate to them in that way because I do this in my own life.
I don't think that's why people like the Kardashians. But
because they're able to relate to it.
What? No, I think it's
like they've seen those reactions in their own lives, and they're like, "Oh my god!"
To be totally honest with you,
that's super out of this world, and that's where their relation is because they're able to understand. Like, whoa, that's a fucking far out reaction.
Yeah, but that's not that. Like, that's not relating. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think that people like the Kardashians because they can't relate to it. And it's like, well, I can't imagine having that much money. Like, I can't relate to this at all, and that's why I love it.
If you stand back far enough, it's going to become unrelatable. But you come to it...
But I think that's why they like it.
Closer and closer.
That's what they enjoy about it, is that they can't relate to this lifestyle. Like, they can't relate to this lifestyle because it's so beyond them.
Well, here's the thing. They're able to relate to a certain level, and then once they've zoomed out and seen the Kardashians are fucking rich and not who they are, then that's what draws them in even more because they're so similar at such a specific level. yet so different.
People are not thinking like that though. People just say rich people I want to watch. Like I love watching rich people. Like I can't even comprehend what it's like to be like that. Like I want to watch that.
Well, no, think about what the rich people are doing, because they're the people who are watching the rich people. They're going, like, damn, how could she act like that? Did you see that? And then it's
some
their
people
own
love
philosophical debate. It becomes a philosophical debate now. Just granted, it's about like some low-level celebrity shit, but it's a philosophical debate.
On what though? I don't think it runs that deep.
It's not a deep conversation, but it's a conversation. They're talking with each other, going, or like even having internal dialogue with themselves, seeing the actions of these rich people or celebrities in general, and just going, would I do that? That's so interesting. Because they're not in that situation.
I think they're definitely doing the would I do that at some point.
That's so interesting.
No,
is that not what drives their interest?
No,
because they start relating it back to themselves.
That's interesting, but like that, the concept you just brought up is interesting. But that's interesting to me, not other people. Like
because you haven't taken it down to that level.
But even if, dude, there are plenty of people that they just don't care. Like they've grown up and gone through child development and have been conditioned to just be uninterested. And there's nothing you can do to interest them. Like they're not. Like,
who are these people?
Adults, plenty of them.
Uninterested in anything?
No, that's not.
They have interest.
Not sociopaths.
So they're able to relate to something.
But there's under your relation nonsense that's just wasting time right now. is
it makes sense.
I see where you're going with it, but under that scaffolding, there should be nothing that I can't make someone interested in, as long as I relate it back to them.
Yes.
But that's not true, because there's plenty of things that like quantum physics. Well, that's actually a bad example. Let's take something a little more boring. Because quantum physics is just too weird and it is just like inherently interesting.
Please try to find something boring, because I guarantee you it won't be boring if presented by the right person.
That's not true.
That's very true.
Well, you can relate something to someone anyway.
Yes.
So relate the Kardashians to me, so I'm interested, because I'm not yet.
You're not interested.
No.
In that little where you said that you were interested.
No. I was interested in the idea of other people watching them, not me.
And relating that back to themselves.
No. This is about me watching the TV show.
Well, in order for me to make you interested in the Kardashians, I have to be interested in the Kardashians.
Oh, that's bullshit. But there's plenty of things like
I'm sure I could find something interesting about the Kardashians, but I just haven't gone into that realm yet. I don't have TV at home. I'm not forcefully watching them online. Like I don't.
So what about? Let's take it back to let's go something that's more boring, but
because I don't know anything that's boring.
No, me neither. But I'm talking about like for people, and it's more than you'd think. Like let's go to the morality.
Wait, no, we have somebody here now.
Let's go to the morality discussion. There are plenty of people that just like don't care. Like there's nothing, and that's like the most relatable thing is like what is right and wrong. And,
no, but even the people who say they don't care do care.
They're not interested. Like you can drill down with them into the core of it. Like I want to have a conversation with you on why this is right and why this is wrong. And there are people who are just not interested. They're like, it just is. That's right and that's wrong. Like if you, there are people that just aren't interested in the philosophical concept of morality.
The block has come up now.
But there's nothing unrelatable about that? That's the most relatable thing that you could have.
No, it becomes unrelatable when it comes up against their own ideals. Because that's where the block comes up.
But then that's still relatable. I mean, no matter what, that concept is relatable.
The concept is relatable if the person receiving the concept is choosing to receive it. If you're going to tell somebody, like, that's wrong,
wait,
and they're not open to being told that's wrong, they're no longer interested. Matter of fact, they're angry.
But they're still relating. They can still. There's a reason why that it brought that anger up, and it's because it relates to them. If it didn't, then they wouldn't push back.
Well, there's got to be a little bit more now to relate that concept. You've definitely related it to them.
But this is where I'm saying, like, I'm not arguing that the whole relation thing doesn't play a part. I'm saying
it's the biggest thing.
I'm saying it has nothing to do with it. Like, it comes along for the ride, but it has nothing to do with it.
It's the biggest thing.
No, because then why isn't that person
interested?
Yeah,
in the morality,
even though they're relating to it, and let's say it has nothing. Let's say it's not coming up against the block. Let's say they're not religious at all.
Also, like, delve into interest, because that whole scenario coming up where they've put up the block and the little information that got in, they're now turning away. Are they not interested? From the outside looking into that conversation between the person putting up the block and the person putting in the new information,
the person
are both parties not interested now?
The person putting up the block, that's not where it should have went. Because putting up the block, I would agree, shows some level of interest. But I'm talking about someone who doesn't put up the block. They have no block. They just have no interest. Like, they just don't care to talk about it.
I remember I did this before, too. Like, you had brought up something, and I was just like, dude, this is super boring. Do you remember that?
Qualia.
Yeah, it was Qualia. Now, that can be super interesting. Like, when you told me about it, like, in the moment, granted, I didn't say it, but I was also still trying to grasp the concepts myself. Even now, I'm still trying to grasp the concepts. I can understand what you're using to explain it and all that, but I just haven't related it to myself.
But there are people that can relate it to themselves, and they still don't want to. They just don't care to talk about it. They don't care to explore it anymore.
In order for you to argue that, you're going to have to bring forth an example of that.
To argue that someone
bring me an example of somebody who doesn't relate, who relates to something.
Well, just
is not
think of what you're arguing. You're arguing that it's impossible to relate to something and be uninterested.
Yeah.
But you can relate to, like, you
can relate to anything.
But even
if
once
you choose to.
No, that's not how interest works. You can't choose to be interested.
Yeah.
No, you do.
Like me.
That's total nonsense.
I was choosing.
That's clearly not
whether
the case.
to further delve into the concept of qualia.
But you were already interested then.
Except for when you brought up the concept of qualia.
Or you were interested in something in something else that delving into it more was just a side effect. But you can be like relation. That's why I say relation is intertwined. Like, relating to concepts is intertwined, but it's not the reason. It's just not the reason. There's something more that you can. There's something more that brings up that interest. I just don't. I don't know what it is, but it's something.
I told you what it is.
Nah, son. It's something more.
I gave you the answer and you refuse.
That's not the answer.
But
let's at least keep it open and think of alternatives, as if that isn't, because I still think it's something else. And
interesting.
And for some reason I think that it has to do. and
Well, tell me. You have to tell me what you think it is.
well, I don't know, but I
have some assumptions.
I don't really. But what I'm doing right now is for some reason, I'm pairing it with humor, and
that's the ultimate relation.
And the cause of what causes things to be funny, and it's a similar mystery. Now most people think that humor is funny because
relation.
No, not at all. The relation is part of it. Relation is part of all of this, but it's not the take it or leave it aspect. So
it's gonna be the 85% aspect.
Yeah, but that still doesn't matter. It's not like it's something that can be there and often is, but doesn't have to be. I'm looking for the thing that is always there and has to be there. For
relation
humor,
is that.
No.
But continue with the humor.
For humor, it's usually, or this is not what it usually is, or this is what it is usually is, but I'm not sure if this is what the main thing is. People say it's expecting one thing, but getting but then
the unexpected.
The unexpectedness of it. So you expect a situation to go one way, like your mind naturally tends towards one direction, like when someone's telling a story or whatever, and all of a sudden they drop the punchline and it's just something totally unexpected, and that's what makes it funny.
Can I make an assumption on what's happening in that moment? I want to say that in the moment where your assumptions have been flipped, it's become self-referential now. You're looking back on yourself and going, wow, I thought this thing and it went a different way.
I think
that's hilarious.
I think the funniest I think the humor that you find to be the funniest is that humor. But again, it's not necessary, because there's plenty of humor that I can't relate to, but it's still funny. Like, it's just like there's people.
Do you laugh during that?
I think so. I would say so. Like, there's definitely humor where it's just total nonsense, and like
toilet humor.
And I can't. Toilet humor? Don't like toilet humor.
Dude, you love toilet humor.
No, because I would call it something else.
What do you call it? Fart jokes?
No, because there's a type of toilet humor that's just straight dumb, and that doesn't make me laugh at all. But then there's a way of, and then even then, it's not the toilet humor that makes me laugh. It's the timing. It's just the timing that makes me laugh.
And that'd be like relating to the unexpectedness.
Yeah, absolutely. Because timing and humor is huge. Yeah. Like, there can be the funniest joke in the world, and if you time it wrong, it sucks.
Yeah.
You know? But, so the unexpectedness is major. But then there's also, there's like some stand-up comedians that are really smart, and it's not even I guess maybe it is always unexpected, because like they'll like bring up a situation and it'll just be a way I haven't thought about it before, and it's really funny, like the way that they're talking about it, and it's that unexpected way, like oh, I've never thought about it that way before, and I guess that's kind of like unexpected, like that type of humor, you know, where
sounds like you're more relating to it.
That's that type of humor, though. My point.
You're relating to it.
You're sticking on this too hard.
No, dude, it just happens naturally.
No, but that is the funniest type of humor. But that's not. No, the relating humor, of course. The humor you can relate to is the funniest. But it's still not. It's not what's necessary for it to be funny or funny. Yeah.
Or funny.
For humor, it's an unexpectedness. Maybe it's the interesting too. Unexpectedness.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking.
Relatable.
I'm just thinking. You're a fucking idiot. You're a fucking idiot.
Hey, so we have to end this. This is 3 hours, 6:30 right now.
All right, we'll have to get
work at 7.
We'll get back to we'll get back to humor and finding things interesting next time.
This was dope, though.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to continue bringing you content.